Welcome to the It's Your Smarter Money Show, where you will learn well to live well. Discover investing and financial planning strategies, ways to live your best life, insights from engaging experts, and much more. Now, please welcome your hosts.
Welcome to It's Your Smarter Money with Dr. Laura and Professor Steve. As we wrap up 2025, it's the perfect time for us to pause and reflect of what went well, what didn't go as well, and what we expect for 2026. And so today we want to actually look ahead to 2026. The overview of what we want to talk about today is first, just saying goodbye to 2025. And while we can just say that we are very happy with the way our portfolios performed in 2025, um, uh, situated in portfolios that are much less risky, but generated a good return on average. We were talking, Steve, 10%.
About that. Yeah.
Or so. Year to date, it's December 17th.
Yep.
And so we'll see how the rest of the year goes. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, right, in January and discuss the overall
Yeah.
performance of the.
We'll have more of a recap that shows numbers and some very interesting slides and some information showing, for example, the 493 S&P stocks versus the 7, that sort of thing, which we'll cover in January.
Yeah, and so we thought that the best use of our time today instead is to focus on what should we be thinking about for 2026.
Mhm.
Maybe getting some further clarity on what we want to achieve as a partnership along with you and also for you yourself. We want to explore what your overall thoughts are and what we can control, what we can't control,
Yep.
what we should be thinking about. Most importantly, we want to align what we do next year with your overall life purpose, which are
Right.
reflected in your values. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about that and maybe even having some kind of resolution that we're going to behave more consistent with our values going forward might be an end to all this. And we can even work with you
Yeah.
on that in general.
So I think it's a perfect time of year to do that, to reflect on that. The holiday season, a lot of us start to reflect on the past year and perhaps our future. A lot of people they come up with resolutions for New Year's. I'm not saying it should be,
Steve, I've been doing
there
it
should
all
be a
my life.
resolution.
I've been doing
What's
it
that?
since I started out in finance, truthfully. In corporate finance, we did a lot of strategic planning, and I would create what I called a strategic plan for myself. And honestly, there's no way I would be where I am today, good or bad, whatever anybody thinks about it. There's no way that I would achieve the things that I achieved if I had not done that. It's really a
Hmm.
great exercise.
It really is. And so I was never, I guess, as had as much of an affinity to this type of stuff. But recently, I got another designation. Wealth Enhancer Group paid for it, called a behavioral finance designation. And being my technical background, I never really was as much in touch with those types of things. But I really see the value of this now. And I know, so I've done this already with some clients. I think they find it very valuable. So we're going to certainly delve into this in much more detail now.
So when you align your behavior with your values, it is much easier to stay on track and to execute, whether you have spending objectives, whether you have saving objectives, debt management objectives, tax planning objectives, investment objectives. It's all about creating that strategic framework. Using your overall values and what life means to you,
Yep.
in order to stay disciplined and stick to it. So if we could go to the next slide, this really just focuses on the idea that, and yeah, I
Hmm.
say this all the time for clients that work with me. You know that I always say, um, it's money is just a tool. It is
That's
not
right.
the end goal. And there are two sides to money. There's the whole technical component of it and the things that we've been trained in school to understand. And then there's the personal. And, sometimes your decisions are going to not be consistent with what is the optimum technical answer. It's going to be something in between that fits better, feels more comfortable for you. And it's our job to help you understand the pros and cons of those decisions
Yep.
and for you to know what the technical answer is so that you can go in with both eyes open.
That's right. And you have to be careful too, because money is also what think leads to the most conflict in many relationships too, with the spouses. So, and that's why I think that's one important, which we're going to go over in a few minutes, is values called exercise. It might help you create greater alignment between yourselves as a couple too, by the way. The fear response. In other words, when something bad happens, immediately it responds quickly. I think they say within 12 milliseconds it responds, and it's also the part of your brain that triggers the adrenal glands to release a hormone that raises your heart rate and other things to respond to that. And a lot of times the amygdala can be triggered just because of a bear market. Okay, and so you start to make a quick response saying, "Let me sell out of this market because I'm really fearful."
The prefrontal is the logical, rational
Yep.
side of the brain, and the
Yep.
the amygdala and the thalamus are responsible for both emotions as well as instinct.
Yep.
And the problem is that in any situation when fear is triggered, they immediately go into operation and the frontal lobe shuts down. And so I talk about
Yep.
this all the time
Yep.
to my widows and the divorced ladies about the fact that their frontal lobe is not necessarily operating and it's not their fault. This is physically we're constructed this way. And so as what you're saying, Steve, is that during a bear market, it might trigger this. It's the fear. It's like, oh my
Yep.
God, something's happening. What should I do? And so immediately frontal lobe shuts down and you start operating instinct or
Yep.
emotionally.
So there's something called the freeze exercise to consider too. Is that what you do? You take a step back and say, how am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing right now? And try to evaluate those three areas of your reaction to this before you do anything. Think through it. If it's a bear market, think through it.
Steve, I don't know if all advisors do this. Is we document our investment strategy
Hmm.
before the bear market, before anything
Thoroughly.
occurs. And to me, that documented strategy of this is what we're going to invest in, this is what we're not going to invest in, this is the
Yep.
evaluation of the risk you're being exposed to, all of that is really, really key because once that's documented and everybody agrees upon it, the name of the game is having the discipline to stick to it and not to allow this to occur.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So it's important to understand how our brains work because we can get better control over parts of our brain if we understand better how it works.
Yeah, it's Sheffrin, um, is an economist who did a lot of work around financial and economic uh, biases.
Yeah.
He wrote a book where he categorized them into three different groups, and he said people behave in a ways that actually just can disrupt their overall financial plan and their overall objectives
Yes.
because of these three different categories. And so he's done a lot of work around them. And we can talk about some examples on, what does overconfidence look like? What does anchoring look like? What does loss aversion look like in the context of framing? Um,
Yes. Yep. I mean, we have plenty of examples. I mean, overconfidence, I've seen it alone
but
when
so
people
the
work
next
for.
slide shows an example.
All right, perfect.
Okay. So the next slide just shows the example
Hmm.
of back when and actually he did a lot of work around this hurting and overconfidence where people back in the dot-com era started investing regardless of the fact that these companies were not necessarily even producing earnings.
Right.
They didn't have any rational reason to invest in these. And they pumped up the Nasdaq as high as 5,048 in March of 2000, and it declined by right before 2002 to 1350. So that's like an 85% drop. And it
Yes, I remember it vividly.
it didn't come back to 2015, which is
Yep.
a really long time to sit there and wait. And so this is what happens when you're not paying attention, you're allowing your emotions to take the best of you, and the idea that you're going to just be so confident that you don't need to understand what's going on.
Here's another factor here too, is people talk to other people and say, "Wow, I made X amount of dollars on my portfolio." Then you feel bad saying, "Wow, I didn't do anything near that." And then you ask them what they invested in, and you decide to buy the same thing. But, so
Key, Steve, you just said feel. Feel.
there you go.
There's no room for feeling in investing.
Nope, there
Don't
isn't.
feel.
You gotta leave emotions and feeling out of this, and we do. We don't do this with even our own portfolios, but we've been trained that way too. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
The other
here's
bias is the anchoring bias, right?
yep.
And so what this is actually is a slide. There was an investor that we were working with back in 1999, 2000, who had GE stock. Actually, he was an executive at GE, so he had
Mhm.
significant GE stock, and he he bought it at 139 a share, and he wanted to make sure that he would grow with it. And we tried to convince him to sell it. He said, "No, no, no." It dropped. Um, it just continued to drop, and it went pretty low. It was under like $50 a share around the
Right.
2004 uh, 14 timeframe, I think. Um, GE went through a lot of problems. It's finally doing well. If you look at the GE, particularly the, aviation, group, because they wound up
Right.
breaking up the company, but to sit there for 20 years, and so the issue here was that this gentleman, his name was Tony, he kept saying, "No, I paid 139 a share, and even when it dropped down to 104," and we're like, "Sell it, it's still above 100." And he's like, "No, I bought it at 139 a share. I wanna get at least 139 a share." Well, you know, he never got it. He never he because he's so
Nope.
anchored in his brain on that what he purchased it for, regardless of the fact that GE was going through all kinds of problems, he just would not sell it.
There's also another element here is that people work for a certain company, they have there's a overconfidence issue too because they think, "Well, I really understand this company I work for. I know they're gonna really do well." That's another aspect of it as well, and I've seen that too. I see even now with a couple clients that I obviously not gonna mention any names, but so just because you work for a company doesn't mean you know what's going to happen in the future with respect to that company. It's guesswork. And again, this shows you we did a whole video on over-concentrated stock positions back, probably about 6 months ago. It's on the YouTube channel, and if you watch that video, you'll understand why you don't ever wanna be over-concentrated to any stock, especially to a company you work for as well.
This next one just talks about framing, and framing comes into play a lot of times when we talk about loss aversion or risk adversity. And what this really talks to is a concept called recency bias, and the idea that
Mhm.
you're allowing yourself to be influenced by something that has happened in a recent time. And so Richard Thaler and Bernazzi did the study. Actually, Thaler, I did some other work with Sheffrin as well. There's a tight group that did a lot of research around this. And what they did was they looked at two different groups of investors. One group was given 1 year performance of stocks and bonds, and it made them nervous because they saw the volatility in that 1 year. And they wound up choosing a portfolio. They were given a choice of how they wanted to allocate stocks and bonds in a portfolio.
Mhm.
They went to a portfolio that had 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds, a very, very risk adverse situation. The other group was shown returns over a 10-year period. So while they saw the volatility, they saw how it moved and came back and so forth. And
Right.
that group of people chose a portfolio that was 90% in stocks and only 10% in bonds. So this is an example of how looking at a short-term framework can be very harmful. And so those people that are watching their portfolios every day, be cognizant of the fact that you can get triggered by doing that. We usually recommend that you probably don't look at your portfolio that often. Once a quarter, it should be enough
Yeah,
to really get a
yeah,
sense of what's going on in your portfolio. You do want to pay attention. I'm not suggesting that you don't pay attention, but
no,
to watch that, every gyration, just it creates, and it's been shown this framing phenomenon around loss aversion has been shown over and over again to be a real issue.
yep. But I think Thaler, wasn't he in the movie The Big Short at one point? I think he was in that scene in Las Vegas at the table. I
Oh,
think
was
he
he?
was.
Okay.
I think it was Thaler. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. Cameo. Um, what is but so by the way, the
This applies to lottery winners.
well, I've been using this presentation. I've done over a dozen presentations and workshops this year, university, at the chamber, for clients and so forth, to talk about values. And one of the things that I like to kind of stimulate the conversation about is, let's talk and like turn to your neighbor and what would you do if you won, or you got won a lottery or were given $10 million? What would you do? And it stimulates a lot of conversation around what people would do, which is always
Yeah,
very interesting. I want to ask everybody that's watching this, to consider what would you do if you won
mhm,
$10 million? Because what you would do is being influenced, hopefully, by your values.
that's
And so
correct.
when we want to take a look at your overall values, and you can go to the next page.
Actually, it is a good point here because if he did that did happen, it's best off don't do anything. Take a step back and think first. And so, and that's what really we're going to be leading into.
Because your values really represent for you your life purpose. When you
That's
think
correct.
about what really you want out of your life, it's the values that are pushing that. So whether it's friendship, or whether it's charitable contributions to your community, or whether
Right.
it's challenges in
Family or
um
yep.
or just relaxation or fun, all of
Right.
those values will influence um you know should influence how you show up, how you spend, how you save, how you invest.
That's right.
And so it's really, really a very important thing to get a sense and nail down what those values are.
And to some extent, just guide your whole life, really, not even just the aspects that affect money. So, and we're going to go over. We have tools to help you establish what your values are, which we're going to cover.
Um, and this is just a quote that I said, and the journalist
Yep.
quoted me. Financial success isn't just about numbers; it's about meaning. Um,
Right.
and, the whole idea is that money decisions should align with your values, and that we
Right.
should be creating a plan that are consistent with your values, which is why we want you to work on this, and we'll help you work on it, but we want to make sure that the plan that we've created for you is consistent.
Right. So really what you want to do is, and it's a whole process here, actually. And that's the real strength here. First, you want to establish what your values are. And as examples, already mentioned some of these: family, friends, education, etc. Then you want to look at your goals. And your values, by the way, are who you are on your best day. It's theoretically, who do I really, really want to be if I'm a perfect person? And what are my values I associated with that? Okay. And so perhaps you might say, gee, I want to spend more time with my family. Well, your goal could be here. Okay. I want to have a family dinner every week, every month or every week. So I spend more time with my family, or I want to go out and make sure I attend my children's sports games. It could be I want to make sure that I can afford to pay for their college, which is a financial planning goal. And then, there's a table which we're going to show you shortly where you code these in. And next is the behavior. What behavior am I going to take? What actions am I going to take to meet those goals, which are also tied to my values? All right. And so we're going to go into this now in a little bit more detail.
So I've been doing these exercises for many years, probably for the past 20 years.
I
I
only started in the last year.
I
You're way
used
ahead of me.
a hard copy document where I had all the values listed down a page, and would ask people to go through it and select the values that were resonated with them. It was very hard to do. It's a hard
Yeah,
exercise to do just in general, but we were introduced to these value cards through the Wealth Enhancement Group, and so we bought
yeah.
a whole bunch of them, and what the value cards help us do is you
Mm,
can spread them out in front of you and you can cluster them. And you can, like, some of them might be similar, but not exactly the same. And you can
right.
to have them in front of you and you can start thinking about, well, both of these values are important to me, but this value is the motivating value. This value is the one that's actually driving the other value. And so coming up with your prioritization. So the way,
Yeah.
um, the value exercise works is that you sort the values into 2 categories, um,
I
and
think it's about 50 cards, right? Or so, about 50 different cards.
I think so. That's
Yeah.
probably about right, yeah.
I
Um,
just want to mention something real quick. A card will it'll have it'll list the value on side, and perhaps there'll be an explanation on the back. But you may view the explanation of that value a little differently, and that's important as well to also consider your understanding of that value, and it may differ. So
yep. The second thing you wanna do is reduce about once you get the two groups, you then
right,
wanna start reducing them, and so this is where it starts getting more difficult.
it does.
You wanna get down to ideally 10, maybe 15 of the core values, um,
Right.
because the last step is to get down to 5, and so that's where you start grouping them and figuring out, okay, out of these 3, which one really is they're all similar, but which one is the one that's really driving it?
That's right, and it's not easy. It makes you think, and that's actually I think the value of this exercise. It makes you really makes you think and focus on who are you really as a person, or what matters to you the most, and that's really important because I don't think most of us don't really think of that at that enough. I probably so as we go through life and our daily routine and so forth and so on.
So when I do this exercise in workshops, the first you get an empty sheet with not the values on here. Um, I put in my values so that you could
Right.
see how I structured it. They're going to be, there's no right or wrong answer, but this is what was
No.
important to me. And
Yes.
so I said, okay, these are my personal values. But then the exercises that we have people walk through is the second step after getting your values squared away and saying, okay, fine, these are my values, is to, as Steve said, the cards have descriptions on them. But to me, like, what does it mean to say family is
Right.
important to me? Well, I wanted to define it in my own, like, what does that mean? Okay, so the value of my family reflects shared laughter during meals. Okay, so having meals, family meals, really important to me.
Right.
Supporting each other during tough times, making culture in my family that when somebody is not doing well, that we all rally around them, and traditions. So now with the holiday season,
Yep.
to me, it's all. I mean, my husband keeps
I come
telling
back.
me, Laura, nobody does what you do for the holidays, and it's like I'm actively trying to create these traditions that um, that will emanate. And so really understanding what that meant to me helps me understand then how I was going to structure my goals. So
Hmm.
the next slide talks about we talk in our workshops about what are the best types of goals, the types of goals that you can really actually implement. And
That's right.
a lot of people might know this from even their business background. If you were ever asked to create these types of goals, the idea of creating SMART goals that have some boundaries around them, um, you know, uh, kind of important. And so there, you can go past this probably, Steve, because I don't want to necessarily
Yeah.
get too into this,
Into the
but
weeds here. Sure.
uh,
And
I actually.
we're happy to discuss this more with you further if you want to speak to us.
These were the goals for actually, I'll show you my, just keep going, Steve. I'm sorry.
It's
Um,
okay.
into and even past this next slide, because I wanna show you. what I did. But yeah, this one. Yeah.
This
Um,
one? Okay.
so this again, so this is in the workbook that I've created where you put your description and in my mind, and you could go, I mean, I've gone back and forth between what are the tools that we use that support this overall value.
Mhm.
And I once did it where I had not just money and time, but I had network and I had other resources, skills, and so forth. And I wound up because got way too detailed and it was a difficult exercise for people to go into. I said, let's
Mm.
just focus on those two most scarce resources, which are money and time. And
Yes.
what do we, if I was going to do something in the short run, what would I do to support the goals?
Right.
Support that value. And I created some goals around creating a family vacation. Um, and then I have time goals as well. And then what about long-term goals? And I have um, creating a donor advised fund for my family so that it's actually a Matia family trust, which I wanted to create that I have my family coming in, and this is part of my estate planning. They have to meet once a year and determine how they want to gift 5% of the overall fund, where they're going to give it. And it's my way of keeping them together and living out this tradition. And so it got me very, very clear on what do I want to do and what should I do. And both of these goals, by the way, have been achieved. It's that. Um, and
Great.
so these exercises are really important. Um,
Yes.
the next slide actually just
Yeah.
talks about how you this kind of visually works, where you're looking at your values, then talking about your overall goals and determining how your resources will play out. But
Yeah.
the work that Steve's done actually has it framed in a little bit of a different alignment model. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're both valid, and I wanna mention, by the way, don't consider this something that's static. You may wanna reevaluate your values through time because they can change. So perhaps redo the values this values card exercise, say, maybe every couple of years or whenever you feel like something in your life has changed and, perhaps you had, some kinda health crises, so your values can change. Yeah, or some
They
other.
definitely changed. My
Yep.
values that I just shared with you are not, if 5 years ago, they would have been very different.
Right, and that's the point. So, like your financial plan is, you can't view it as something that's static. You really wanna consider it something that's changeable. There's certain core values you may have, like one of mine was loyalty and, education. Those will probably never change, but 2 maybe perhaps 1 or 2 of my other values may change,
What are your
through
5
time.
values, Steve?
Well, I had a friendship because I really value, my friends, and to me, that also includes family, by the way. I consider those together. Education. I mean, I'm still taking courses even now. I've been my whole life, I've always, big on education. Loyalty, I was always been, loyalty my both ways, to me and also for me to other people. Um, Integrity, I've always I was raised in a family where my dad had the most integrity of any person I ever met, for example, and independence. I never wanted to rely on others. I always wanted to be self-reliant, so those are mine right now, and that may change. I did it with my wife, and I think it's also important to do this with your spouse. You can do it together or you can do it separately. My wife and I did it separately because I didn't want to in any way influence hers. Um, I really don't wanna do that. So you may decide, "Gee, I don't wanna influence my spouse," and it may make sense not to do that, you know? But I tell you this, didn't lead to a divorce in my case.
Mm. I think
We
it's
actually
good
found
to
we had
do
there was
it
a lot of.
separately, Steve, because then you come together and you say, "Okay, well, how do we wanna prioritize these?
Yep,
And how do we wanna prioritize our goals?"
yep.
Because, there's a limited amount of time and money, and so how are we gonna do that?
We had a lot of commonality in ours. I think that's part of I think most spouses will because that's why you got married and while you're still together probably. Because even though if they're not spoken and they weren't laid out on paper, I think it's probably a lot of commonality in the values among spouses, you know? Otherwise, you probably would have not stayed together, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but I think that's true. And so this came from that program I mentioned, which I was part of, the behavioral finance designation. And so this is a good example of how you would fill this out. And we're happy to provide this to you. I'm not going to read the whole thing over, but I just did it with a client, and the person, I'm not going to mention who it is, obviously, did such a phenomenal job at this. And I asked that person and this is not theirs, to sanitize it and use it as an example that we can use in the future. So if you do want us to do this with you, I can provide that to you as a great example of how you may want to consider this. And Laura's approach is also a great example
Yeah,
as well.
they're different. But
Yep.
my approach is really trying to get to a place where like clearly know exactly what the goal is, and
Yep.
you're monitoring that. This is a little bit looser, but it's easier to do. So, um, we have both of those exercises at our fingertips, and I actually think that it would be helpful if you would like. We can walk you through it as
Yep.
well in our
Yep.
office.
And I will mention the client, his is more like yours, because this is just a third party, example. That's all it is. And so, but the client that did it is much more like yours, much more detailed, and that's why I think it's a good example, quite honestly, as is yours. And so, as we mentioned, this is sort of repetitive, but your values are your ideal self, the person that you say to yourself, "Gee, if I were a perfect angel, this is what I would be doing. These are the values I would have." And then you want to look at, how has my behavior been in relation to my values? And what happens is, you may affect your behavior, because suddenly now you say, "Gee, I think because of my values, I can really clarify some of my goals better." And then you can look at your behavior and say, "Gee, these are my goals. Has my behavior sort of meshed with my goals and also with my values?" And it's probably going to alter your thinking in terms of your behavior. You might say, "Gee, I really want to. My family's really important to me. I want to make sure my children go to college, and perhaps." And that would be your goal, is perhaps to fund a 529, and you say, "Gee, I haven't really been saving enough. So I have to change my behavior." So it does affect your behavior, you know? So I think that's an important way to look at it.
What also gives you a sense of control. It gives
Yeah,
you a
that's a
sense
great
of,
point.
a sense of purpose, a sense of, I know where I'm going. It keeps you disciplined. There's a lot of positive benefits from doing something like this. You're living intentionally as opposed to
Yep.
being a pinball in a pinball machine where you're just being knocked around. You're now in control. And so I use these exercises, especially the reason why I started using these years ago was with my women empowerment types of programs, where I was also trying to inspire and convince women that the end goal is not just having a pile of money. It's about what you wanna do with that money, and
Right.
there's a reason why you need to be engaged with your money. Um, so
Well, I think the way to look at money is a tool to enable actions and also other things, but it's an an enabler. Yeah, that's really what money is. Don't think of money as money. Think of it as what you can do with it, and really what you can do with it that matches your values and your goals. So part of what plays into this and helping you control your emotions, by the way, when the bad things happen in the market, is to first of all, we have to understand that the certainty of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in these four key areas. We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know, how our health's gonna be, and I just saw that recently with someone I know, a close friend, and it's upsetting. Um, the markets, we obviously have no idea how the market's gonna perform. I don't care what anybody says, and they may tell you it's gonna do something, and, interest rates are gonna go up, and because of that, the market's gonna drop. I mean, tariffs are gonna go up, the market's gonna crash, with so many things we've seen that no, the experts are wrong so frequently, so don't even bother looking at that. And also the economy. We don't know what's going to happen there either. Every year the Wall Street Journal would pull, I don't know if they still do it or not, pull like 40 different economists regarding what will inflation be this year, what will GDP be this year, and out of the 40, maybe two would be right. That's just sheer luck. I mean, that's like it's throwing a dart at the dartboard. So with the smart money philosophy, which is really important, it's important to try to prepare for these things. So what happens with premature death and you have young children, for example? Okay, and that's part of where financial planning comes in. You know, you should have a life insurance policy. We're going to show this a little bit more. How are you prepared for sickness or injury, disability, or accidents? Um, are you prepared for good health and bad markets? So we call this a smart money philosophy. And so, for example, length of life. Maybe you'll live much longer than you thought. Do you have enough in retirement savings? Um, do you have enough to fund death if it's premature? Do you have enough to protect your family? That's life insurance, of course. I'm not going to go over each one of these, but there's an approach to each area of uncertainty, and we'll help you with these. And we have always been doing this. Help you with approaches to help make sure you're protected against the certainty of uncertainty.
Well, this is the background really to what we do.
Yes, it is.
But
Yep,
it's important for you, for the clients to understand why we're doing it and why it's so important. Because
that's correct.
it
Yep.
turns out that not no clients have similar plans to anyone else. They're all very unique.
That's correct. Everybody's different, and if you're, for example, 65 years old and your children moved away and you have a nice net worth, you may not need life insurance, for example. So everybody's different. That's just one example. Obviously I'm not going to go into all the details here, but we're happy to provide these slides to you as well. And so the smart money philosophy here is also having a smart place to get money to meet a need, a source when you need it. Premature death, that's life insurance. You have some sort of major financial crises. For example, the roof on your house just went, and it's going to be a $30,000, $40,000 expense. Having a safe place to get that money, even when the market's down 30%, which we know will happen at some point. And that also will affect your emotions too, by the way, and make you less apt to do some sort of spur of the moment action. Take some sort of spur of the moment action. For example, selling out in your portfolio, knowing that you have a safe place to get money in terms of a need, and that's having a cash reserve. By the way, all right. It's also something that we've called the 3 bucket strategy, which we'll cover in I think one more slide actually. And so we're big believers in this 3 bucket strategy. And that, for example, is first to have a cash reserve, something very liquid and very safe with no risk. Could be treasuries, could be a money market account. And then having a second bucket, which is something that will earn more. It could be bonds, some type of bonds, it could be corporate CDs, it could be municipals, that type of thing. And having a sufficient amount in that second bucket too to meet not necessarily immediate needs, but needs that may occur in 2 or 3 years. And the third bucket is the one we really help you manage is your diversified portfolio. And that may include some of the second bucket, by the way, the bonds. But if you have all your money in the stock and don't have any reserves, that's when you're going to be kind of forced into making some snap decisions if the market goes down 30% and making a bad decision, selling out at the bottom, not putting money back into to get the recover, take advantage of the recovery because you need money really quick. And so we call that the smart money philosophy. All right, Laura, do you have anything else to add?
No, not to add, please.
Okay. All right.
Um, well, I guess what I overall what I just add is that, again, we want to encourage you, inspire you maybe to have a 2026 New Year's resolution
Yep.
to make sure that your life aligns more with how you would like it to look, your life purpose, your values, and establish some goals that will help bring you there. And
Yep.
when I tell you we have all kinds of exercise, I mean, I've done workshops, 1 day workshops, I've done, couple hour workshops, I've done series of workshops over time, like 10 workshops over time. We have exercises that can help you if you get stuck. We
Yep.
have ways um, of encouraging you. And to that extent, it may influence how we structure your financial plan and your investment plan. So, um,
Yeah. And I want to mention in our next meeting with you, if you want us to help you go through the values card exercise, we're happy to do it. And if you prefer to do it on your own, we're happy to provide you with those cards, and you can do it on your own. But we're happy to either walk you through the process or enable you to do it on your own. Either way.
So, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful holiday. Happy New Year. You'll probably be hearing for us in January
Yep.
we'll be reaching out to see if you would like to pursue an update on your values and goals and refresh of where you're going. So
Yep.
thank you and again, have a great holiday.
Thanks for listening to the It's Your Smarter Money Show. If you found this episode valuable, please like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, learn well, live well, since, after all, it's your smarter money. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.